Alrighty.
Hi, so
So,
I am Glen Martin Fitch, 16th century poet lost in the 21st century, and old-time rabble rouser.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So, when we interviewed, you sent us some articles talking about what you do.
Or have done, yes.
So, as we know that you're an activist, but what first got you into activism? What was your experience getting into that?
Okay, well the story is actually the woman who owns this home and I are friends since 1973, and I was at UC Riverside as she was. She was working at the Women's Center, and I needed some income, so the university gave me an option for some part-time work, and one of the things was to organize a program of volunteers to escort women on campus from the library to their cars because there had been an assault on campus. So she interviewed me, and I did that task. And while in the course of this, I asked, well, what can I do to stop rape? And she said, talk to men. So now if she had said there's this product called Amway, my life would have gone this way. And instead she said, talk to men. And then I heard about a group called Men Against Rape in Santa Cruz and put 4 3-piece suits in my car because I was a shoe salesman, and drove up here and didn't know anybody. Got a job selling shoes and went to the first meeting I could of Men Against Rape.
What was it like working there? What was Men Against Rape like? Because was it one of those kinds of things where it's only for men who have been victims of rape, or?
No, it was honest, sincere men who were trying to confront sexism. But I had heard it said that it's easier to be in a group for something than be in a group against something. And men were contacting us not for rape, but they had men who came to us because they had hurt someone that they loved, usually first time caught domestic violence offenders.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up creating from that men's alternatives to violence, and that was an exciting group because many of the men who had been participating in it, after they went through the design of the program, decided to volunteer and help others. So we had a weekly drop-in anger stress workshop that taught how to take a time out, and those men often helped facilitate that. And then we had a program that involved teaching communication skills, stress reduction techniques, dealing with self-esteem issues. Did I say stress reduction? I think so. Anyway, and then after that, each of the men wrote out the skit that brought them to us. We acted it out with another guy in the group playing her part, and went through it stage by stage to find out, when he decided to hit why and what he could have done instead. So, next question.
So, which one?
Where did you grow up?
Oh, I grew up near Niagara Falls and got accepted at graduate school at UC Riverside, and then came to Santa Cruz. So it was just no domestic violence in my family. I'm not a survivor of sexual assault. We did go, I was an advocate for men who were sexually assaulted at the hospital, where I would shoo the nurse and the police out and say, this is what's going on, how are you? You can stop this at any time. And also the men who were close to women had been sexually assaulted, who often act like someone peed on my Cadillac. You know, this didn't happen to you, this happened to her. So, okay.
What was it like working with like male rape victims? Because I know that's a lot less common than women, but
Yeah.
what was that like?
Well, there were unique challenges, and just given clear information helps a lot. I mean, when I walked in and found an adult male in the fetal position on the floor, after a nurse told me that she hated doing these kinds of things, it was definitely a challenge. Eventually, police and nurses were part of a sexual assault response team, and I did many trainings with them on what they needed to do. It was unique for these men to at least acknowledge that this is what happened to them. And so validating their feelings and such is really crucial. And then just making things comfortable. Two boys had been assaulted by a neighbor, and we were at the hospital, and I found out they were older sibs of a whole bunch of other kids. So I said, well, let's go look at the babies. And so we went over there and looked at all the babies, and they were just very, very thrilled, these two boys, to see the babies. So anything I could do to normalize and, validate their feelings, and yet also make them realize that what they're feeling is quite normal given the circumstance.
Yeah. How did that, like, working with them, like, how did that like affect you? Like,
I keep thinking, did somebody touch me somewhere, sometime? Why am I doing this? And nothing so far has come up yet, though I might have a whopping nightmare tomorrow. Well, I felt I was being of service and just really kind of groomed to do this because of real long-term work with men and identifying their feelings and validating them.
So, also, sort of around that topic was like, what do you like to do in your spare time, like to kind of like recover from like a day of work, like?
Oh, well, what worked for me was a friend of mine's grandmother from the Ozarks showed me a quilt she made, a crazy quilt, and I was working at a men's clothing store hemming trousers, and having these leftover 2 inches of beautiful fabric, and so I ended up making quilts. Just machines are great. When people are crazy, you just get into the machine, and when the machine is crazy, you have people. So it was that's what I did to take care of myself. I have to say that when I worked with Men Who Batter, the first guy told me how he had hit his sister. And I realized that it wasn't me and them, it was us. Because certainly we had enough sibling violence to validate that as a really bad relationship, to which I have made amends.
Did you ever feel like in danger any of those times when you were working with them, like men who have like violence or anything?
No. Because anger generally is what they present, but if I can get them to realize that what they're actually feeling is scared, lonely, angry, hurt, stuck, abandoned, we can identify those. And most men were really anxious to try and find an answer. They didn't want to hurt the people that they love. And so they were anxious to find the keys. I mean, as the group started, initially there'd be people that, were there because the court told them to. And those guys didn't last long. But without bravado, without saying, "Oh, well, I did this," and "Well, I did this." It was like a mystery trying to figure out what's this all about. And I'm thankful for the tools, because if you only have sexism as a hammer, all your problems are nails. And to be able to say, if you listen to her and rub her feet tonight, I'm not saying you'll get laid, but I have a much better sense that you probably have a better chance, if you approach her that way. In the role plays, when we reenacted them, I would stop and say, what do you see, what are you feeling, what are you thinking, and what's happening to your body? We would stop at the moment that he thought that services were being denied, when he thought that he was not being respected, at the point at which he started calling names, which is when one objectifies. I can't hurt you, but if you're a punk, I can hurt you. And the last possible point, he could have taken a time out, and then his decision to offend, of which he made a decision. Why? What did he do? Well, this guy hit his wife in the sternum and cracked her sternum. And big, tall guy. So I got on a hassock and I said, "You show me what you did." And he put his fist like this and he said, "She broke my heart. I wanted to break her heart." And you can't go around cracking people's sternums, but I understood what he was trying to say. And if I've worked with toddlers for like 9 years, and so it was a sense of use your words. Don't hit, don't bite, use your words. So if he could, and then we do the role play again one more time, where he would incorporate the information that we gave him. So like, this is the point I could take a time out. This is what I would do on my time out. When I came back, this is a communication skill I would use. And this wasn't therapy, but if he went into a therapist and said, I have this problem about abandonment. She pulled the rug out from underneath me. That's why I tripped her. So he has a handle on what's going on. So he was never out of control. Okay.
What is your most memorable experience with activism?
I think one of the most satisfying moments was I was talking to a man whose daughter and her friend had been assaulted on the beach. And he was doing this whole, she should have done this and she should have done that. And I said, "You were in the service, right?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "You would not have left your buddy in the field." He said, "Yeah." "Your daughter stayed there to make sure that her friend was okay. What she did was really reasonable and something she probably learned from you." And that just changed the whole tone, and then he was able to come back and say, "I'm proud of you, I'm glad you were there for your friend," and that made a big difference. So that's one. There's a bunch of them.
That's cool. Well, I also noticed that you said that you had done like self-defense classes for like gay men. What was that like? What was that about?
Oh, well, that was handy information. There were good turnouts for the events, and had somebody, I don't know self-defense, but I had someone who did, and he came in and showed us these different techniques. And some of them are just really simple. If I put my finger up, your throat can't go any farther than my finger. So if you're trying to give me an unwanted kiss, this is great for children. The other one is even a toddler can pull back on somebody's pinky. So those are two self-defense techniques that are almost benign, but are effective. So you don't need to know secret judo holds. What you really need to know is that you have a right to your space and a right to protect yourself, which is really the key issue. But the guy showed us a whole bunch of secret judo. moves too, which
That's
was cool. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity on the topic of that, like, what kind of other things did he show you?
I can't recall. I mean, it was ways to get somebody off balance. Aikidooing into someone's movement rather than trying to fight against it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, alternatives to trying to box and take a stance. Things that to be wary of, before an incident like that happens. That's about the best I can recall. That was a long time ago.
That's cool though.
What was the worst experience with angry parents you have ever had?
Well, I had worked in daycare,
Mm-hmm.
and I had worked with men who batter.
Yeah.
And then the battered women's shelter asked me to work at the battered women's shelter itself,
Mm-hmm.
which was a great leap of trust, to be there to be a positive role model. And for one woman, I was the first man that ever changed her daughter's diaper. She didn't know men can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw women pull knives on other women. I saw 13-year-old boys replace their father as their mother's abuser. A lot of things. But because I had done that and also worked in daycare and worked with men who batter, the courts asked if I would chaperone parents that were at risk to their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be the judge's eyes and ears, and probably the only person besides the judge that got along with both mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go to mom, and the child would be in the car, and she goes, "He won't get out. He's so frightened." And I would say, "Well, look, we have the secret code. If you see the word carrot, I'll know that you're not okay. And I'll step in, and I'll make sure you're okay." And and she's going, "How can you do this?" So I get him around the corner, and he runs and goes, "Daddy!" And the dad's looking at me like, "What took you so long?" And then, the dad's doing this, look at this, she's alienating him against me. And I said, "Hey, maybe he's constipated. There's a park across the street. Why don't we just go swing and slide, feed the ducks?" And then bring him back to the mom, and the kid starts going to slunk, and the mother's going, oh, this is so terrible. And the poor kid is caught between this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the worst experience was when I had one of those fathers, usually it's convicted sex offenders or parents that have been accused or suspected of sex offenses, physical battery, kidnapping and such. And I had one father spit at me in his kid's presence in the parking lot, and I had to get a restraining order against him. I wasn't frightened of him, but it was not behavior that professionally I could tolerate.
Mm-hmm.
This was not okay. And the judge was quite amenable to get me the restraining order. So that was the worst.
Hmm.
Oh, and there was the mother who apparently had wanted to set her kids up in their church to be sacrificed. And I asked her about this, and she said, "Well, when you're a mom, you got to do what moms got to do, and this is what we were thinking about, And so I just sort of said this, "Tell me about that." While inside I'm going, "Ah!" Okay.
Oh, yes. So also in those articles that you
Mm-hmm.
sent, is that you said that you were thinking about like having a child, but did you ever?
Well, I picked a toddler up one day, and he called me Daddy, and I really, really had to sit down and do some heavy thinking. I did donate some genetic material to a lesbian couple that I did not know, and and they wanted it that way, and I respected that. And then suddenly I realized about a month ago, that kid's probably 35 now. I don't have to respond to this, this boundary. And I said, maybe he wants to know that I have end-stage liver disease, and I'm, dealing with that. And so I did the Ancestry.com, and it didn't happen yet. And also, it just never seemed to happen in my life. I was so busy taking care of other people's kids that I never had that opportunity.
Well, what kinds of things have you been working on recently? Like,
Not much. As I said, I have the end-stage liver disease.
mm-hmm.
So I'm never in pain, but I'm often weak. And I can't run across the parking lot to grab a kid. I'm hoping that someday someone will try and track me down and say, tell us what you did with Men Who Batter, because we'd like to do a program like that. But no one has. Right now I'm just keeping my dog happy and writing.
What were men's alternative for violence, and what was it like?
Well, sometimes it was very, very good. And sometimes it was like all groups, a clash of egos and all the other garbage that happens in any kind of program. And I eventually left there, having created it with my friends. My friends left and I left because the board that we set it up as a nonprofit and had a board of directors, and then suddenly, rather than raise funds and set policy, which is what I think a board should do, instead they decided to second guess my decisions, not raise funds. And it was just like, this isn't what I want. So I left there. It was one of the best jobs I've ever had, but it was fine to leave. So I think it is not unnatural in human nature to take on the disease of what you're dealing with. So women's crisis support always seemed to be in a crisis. And I think there was some hostage taking on the board level. So, but that was the negative. The positive was that there was a lot of it that was really exciting. Watching men want to change was wonderful. Making men feel safe was wonderful. And being around a lot of incredible kids that were maybe smarter than their parents and being able to figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, both good and bad.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just totally had the perfect question in my head. But,
I don't remember.
so you mentioned earlier that, like, you worked at the daycare at the women's shelter.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what was it like working at a daycare and, like...
Well, I worked at a daycare center.
Oh, so that was separate?
And then I worked at the shelter doing the children's program.
Mm-hmm.
At the daycare center I worked at, it was wonderful. We got to reparent ourselves without belts and hairbrushes. We certainly had some strong staff meetings, but always with good heart. We happened to not have a staff turnover for 9 years.
Wow.
Which is amazing for any job. And, it was really a ratio of 1 to 4. And it was a sense of preventing a bite before it happened, encouraging kids to use words. And it was not unusual for one teacher, instead of having 3 kids, for one teacher to have 4 kids, and one teacher alone watching that one biter, because all the kids bit, all the
Mhm.
kids got bitten, and it had nothing to do with aggression. It had to do with their minds are working faster than their mouths. Words are new, they've learned everything from their mouths. So, and then just watching them explore, and about the time that they, took a block and made it into a power saw, we're going, well, their time to graduate. Imaginative play is beyond our scheme. So that was wonderful. So I was able to go into the shelter and with some good background about kids in development, just say, there's another way we can do this. And watching a little girl not sit at the table when we're doing the kids' tea party thing and get up and move around and everything else, and you're suddenly realizing you're watching what her mom does in the kitchen. The same, I can't sit down, I've got to do this and this and this. And it was just really insightful and, illuminating.
What was your favorite job that you worked you've worked at the shelter, you did Men Against Rape and all that, but what was your favorite, do you think?
Working with the men who batter, doing the role plays, trying to solve the puzzle, and watching them blossom. There was one man that I called Tin Man, because he not only made tin vents, but he sort of hugged like the Tin Man. Sort of needed an oil can. So, and they're still friends. I mean, many of them still connect with each other and me. And that's nice. And I've had kids that were chaperoned. I had kids from the daycare center. Contact me on Facebook. Like, you remember me? So that's been kind of cool.
It's cool.
Yeah.
So, if you could, if I guess, how would I put it? How would you, if you could have all the kinds of things, how would you do this a program, if you were to come up with a whole new program to help men or something like that? What kind of thing would you do with all your experience?
Well, I think that we really need to confront the misinformation men get about women. And that's why I did some direct action around pornography. And the Miss California pageant and such, the Myth California pageant. Those go way back. So giving men clear information that the power trip against women starts with men interrupting women, going all the way on the spectrum to death. That men who hit their wives to let the women know they probably, they have survived their own death because they could have fallen and broken their skull open. So that this is serious, that even children at the daycare center, we asked them, we didn't ask for their permission, but we alerted them, we're going to pick you up now because you're a human being. You should know, I should treat you this way. And when we got done with the poopy diaper, we said, hey, this is you. They should know this. It's their body. And so if adults treated children with that kind of respect, I do not think that men would be abusing children. And rather than think of them as a clean slate or a doll, that someone else is supposed to control, to realize that they're incredible human beings, I think would make a big difference. I would love to have had the building. The building that I had wasn't bad because when I did neutral transfers and the supervised visitation, the fathers would come up one stairs and the mothers would come up another stairs, and they wouldn't see each other, and to be able to transfer the child from one part of the building to the other. But I would love it if they had an observation so that actually the mother could see that when the child plays with the father, that they're having a good time,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be insightful. So there are many things that I would love to do. Um, I mean, I only gave them just a smattering of stress reduction techniques and, some basic communication skills. When you say this, I feel hurt, and I'd like you to do this because they're my parents, and I'm embarrassed when you say that about them. That would be a wonderful thing.
So you mentioned that you did like action against pornography. Like,
Mhm.
can you go into a little more detail about that? Like,
Well,
what
okay.
was all of that? Like, what kind of
Well,
direct action?
Yeah, this is the time when people were changing billboards, when we had billboards to say "My liver in ruins" from Myers Liquor or something. We would go to. I'm not advocating anything. We would go to a liquor store, and there's a way that if you have a stack of magazines like this and you just touch them ever so gently, they become like a cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
And the store owner is not penalized by the lack of sale of a magazine. The distributor is. So it was not it didn't directly affect them. But we would get a bottle of ivory liquid, warm, wet, white, and sticky, and put it on the top, and then just drizzle it down every single one, just rather quickly, which meant that they were all disgusting, tacky and sticking together. So we did that a few times just to, and as part of the community response. It was just all about educating, getting the word out. The Myth California pageants were wonderful. And my friend was in a ball gown, and he had polio. And I think it was before the placards, he was parked in a handicap place. And the cop said, "That's for handicapped." And he swooped up his skirt and showed his braces and said, "I'm handicapped." So that was a great moment. There was a lot of fun. There was a lot of creativity. We came up with a song called Rich White Men, see how they run. They run must follow the government. You can tell by the way that the money is spent by rich white men." So we had fun.
Well, I guess. So, and this may have been what you already mentioned before, but it said that like when you were younger you had to pay rent by being a professional witness for the court. Was that the?
That's the chaperoning. Yeah.
Ah, okay. What was your college experience like?
Oh, well, it was the beginning of the 60s, so when I got there, we all dressed for dinner, and the men and women had separate dorms. And my mom and dad said, had we known that they were going to change that, we would not have let you go there, because we ended up with co-ed dorms and we didn't dress for dinner. And there was ritual alcohol abuse. Do enough tequila and have a lunch tray, and you can slide down a big slope of snow, and not feel a thing till the next morning when you look at the bruises on your body from plowing into trees. It's just the beginning of feminism, so people were taking issue with things, and my awakening really didn't happen until the graduate school. And then suddenly, the more I talked to men, the more I realized they didn't understand, and the more I actually listened to women, I could understand that men weren't getting it. No, lesbians don't hate men. They have fathers, sons, and brothers. They hate male violence. And so, just this is a piece of information. You should know this, rather than challenge them and call them names, it's just to be able to say, it's like the foot rub. Here's another piece of information. Consider this. And it's really kind of a courtesy. Other thoughts? I mean, I can go talk forever. I can tell you stories.
We'd be happy to hear a few.
I'm trying to think. Male survivor and I worked on a thing that's in the blue pamphlet, or the thing I sent you.
Mm-hmm.
That it came out with. I remember saying, "I remember what you did. You can't pretend I don't. I didn't like it. You can't pretend I did. Just because you're okay with it doesn't mean that it's okay with me, and I can tell anybody I want to."
Mm-hmm.
And that became sort of the real message to men in that circumstance. Other stories. Yeah, he was a bodybuilder, and it was from his father. And when he told his brother said he did it to me too. And he told me once that his mom was, she was there. She could have stopped it. But all she could do when he was belting them is say, "Not the eyes, not the eyes." Don't blind them. So those were sad days. But he was empowered by the process. Trying to think of other wonderful stories or sad stories. There were just a lot of sad, misinformed dads that, at least by being there chaperoning them, this wasn't my job, but to be able to say, well, this is our time, let's go do something fun, and then be able to stop them at a certain point going, no, consider this. Maybe your kid is hungry. Why don't you ask? Or why don't you offer something? And rather than try and misinterpret what kids' motivations are. Because parents, adults do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And some dads just blossomed. A third of the parents I chaperoned were women.
Really?
With substance abuse or mental health issues. Often it was who got to court first with the better attorney that the custody thing started. I made my documentation relieved the false accusations of many fathers. And the I forgot what I was going to say. And most of the families, like within 6 months, everything calmed down. You picked this woman to be the mother of your child twice. And you know who's going to be at their weddings? She is. So, you might as well get used to it now. There was something that you liked about this person to have gotten this close. You got to go back and find out what that is and at least acknowledge it. So a lot of the parents did calm down. And there was a lot of good that came out of the criminal justice system response. There was some misuse of it by attorneys and false accusations and scars and kids that were really kind of trampled over in the process, which was sad. So, it's, I'd have to go back and look at pictures and things like that. Any other thoughts or questions, feelings, concerns, challenges?
Have you ever had like a situation where you just felt like you didn't get the outcome that you wanted and like it just like
Yeah, well, and the chaperoning, I was the judge of Eisner, so it wasn't for me to say, but certainly there were some sad families. There were at least 2 times that 2 men were sharing about their ex-spouses who realized they were talking about the same woman. And which leads you to wonder, this is a woman that has 5 kids by 5 different men.
wow.
And is starting a new relationship, and some of the fathers are getting together to go to court.
Mm-hmm.
So these things get very complicated. And even with convicted sex offenders, there are some that are treatable and some that are not. And the treatable ones, there are programs for them, and I think that those men can still be important part of their family's lives. Their children may not have been the victim.
Mm-hmm.
So when a kid says, "Oh, Daddy did this," all of a sudden, sister's in denial, mom's furious, dad's out of the picture, and it's all my fault.
Mm-hmm.
I caused this to happen. And so it can really be traumatic for them. And if they love their parent, they may want to have access to them. And I ensured that they had safe access, that nothing was going to happen to them in my presence. And there are some basically decent people who do stupid things and have to pay for it. And it's the consequence of their behavior, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that. But it's so easy to dump on any one person all the cumulative unfinished business you have, as well as all the misinformation about offenders on a person. And as there's this continuum between interrupting women and murder, offenses have a continuum too. Should the consequences be equal for all of them? And when in court they decide, that doesn't always work well with people that are dealing with an awful lot of unfinished stuff, which may well be their own unfinished stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, because I'm trying to be very careful that I'm not condoning negative behavior.
No, yeah.
But I understand human nature, and I believe that most people are striving towards health. I think there are some unhealthy people out there, and I have met a few, and who should be behind bars for a long time. Yep.
You say you've met a few, like, how were they unhealthy? Like, what about them?
I mean, this one man who said, I didn't really molest her, I just had her get the towel when I was done pleasuring himself.
Oh,
That's not a healthy man.
No.
And they decided he was not going to be workable towards accepting responsibility and changing his behavior. And there were 2 men, batterers, who murdered their wives right after the earthquake. Everybody that was over the edge was way over the edge. Everybody that was on the edge was over the edge, and everybody else was on the edge. And so these two men murdered their wives, and only later did I realize that they had murdered as juveniles, but those records were sealed. They should not have been sent to me. They were not first-time caught offenders.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was unfair to ask me to try and do something with them when they had this heinous history in their past, and those were hard days. And one of the hardest days was a woman who took her baby and drove up Old San Jose Road and killed herself and killed her baby. And then I saw the father, and he said, "Oh, I don't know why she did that. That was kind of crazy." And I had my heart on the floor, and he's just sort of passing it off as a crazy thing. I don't know. He may have gone through a lot, but I don't think he was really capable of understanding the depth of what had just happened. So that was another bad day. Other thoughts, feelings, concerns, questions, challenges.
You have any, Joe?
Keep me talking.
What kind of hobbies do you do in your spare time?
Well, I told you that the sewing was just something that happened. And my green quilt there I made.
Oh, that's cool.
So, what else? I write, and you can find me on Facebook. I have a page on Facebook. And sometimes some of the stories that I recall get transformed into something. I wrote about the belt in Don't Hit the Eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not my story, but that's the title of the poem. This is not my story. Now I'm just taking care of myself. But, I'm a resource. I wish more people would ask. If you're going to take over a university, in protest of something, the first person you talk to and make friends with is the janitor because they have the keys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm not condoning that behavior, but, just a piece of information that came in around the time of Kent State, with protests and things. Those were grim times, too. A lot of sad, hurting guys. Vietnam and other drugs. Suicides by little means. So we'd like all people to strive towards health, but there's multi-million-dollar industries profiting off of our addictions. They're making lots of money keeping us fat and on diet plans. Wish I had more to share. Trying to think. I'm available for more questions anytime. Email me.
Okay.
I would love to have this document because this is really me. And so if it's transcribed or if it's kept some way that I could...
Yeah, I could definitely send it to you.
Okay, that would be nice. I mean, here I haven't shaved. I didn't know you were going to take pictures,
Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that.
Okay, and...
one other
Mhm.
thing that kind of popped into my head is because I know that you've worked with, battering, like men and stuff like
Mhm.
that, but have you ever had, cases of, battering women?
Yes, and there were women that were anxious to know what I had in my bag of tools to be able for them to use. So, assuming that women would be the proper way to deal with that. I did have a blind man who was abused by his deaf lover, and trying to, I mean, you can't really just decide that there's a clear victim and a clear offender when things are, where's the power imbalance today? So, I don't know what I was saying. Yeah. And it's male violence, but that doesn't mean that it's done only by males.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, apparently women can sexually assault women at rock concerts, women's rock concerts. Domestic violence happens. Anytime there's an imbalance of power, real or just assumed, abuse, betrayal, all those things can happen. It's just that imbalance. And so when you have someone that is physically disabled, poorer than, more religious than, or something, in a relationship, it adds a whole new layer of stress. I mean, you probably encountered that in friendships, just the sense that, he's got more money than I do, and we go to McDonald's, he buys all the stuff, and so there's power imbalances that happen, and, sometimes you have to say, I'm not asking you to buy my lunch, but, I can't go spend money like this.
Mm-hmm.
As part of communicating and being honest. So we're all working on this. I constantly have to monitor myself from interrupting women,
Mm-hmm.
especially the one who lives here. And mansplaining and all. It isn't that these things are more common. Will Smith said this. He said that racism isn't more common, it's just being documented.
Mm-hmm.
So the Me Too things, the sense that getting called on stuff sooner, or being able to figure out, no, that's not okay. Because I remember my neighbor giving me a dish, and I ate it, and I had the dish, and I thought, well, I could return it dirty. And then I thought, no, I can wash it first. A little bit of male privilege option there, and I decided not to take it. So
Mm-hmm.
I think men are worth it. I think men can change. It's been exciting to be part of that process. I'm kind of not talked out, but I just kind of at a blank. I should have remembered good stories to tell.
It's all right. I understand.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being
Bye.
willing to talk with us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for your interest.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
And you'll be speaking to a friend of mine named Willow, or someone else will, I guess. Another friend of mine has been approached, but I don't know by whom.
Ah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'll email this to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. no problem.
Dropbox or whatever you need to do. I
Yeah.
don't know how long it is or how.
54 minutes.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you.
My